So if you've had a job for more than a year, my guess is that you've been in a situation where you've wanted more money. But unfortunately, in business, a lot of your earnings potential and career trajectory is predetermined. Once you make the thing, ultimately your success, what you're ever going to earn, a lot of that is predetermined and set in stone. And really, your career is more about putting in the work to get to those career thresholds as you go on. And that's the same whether you're an accountant or whether you're an NFL player. And so in this video, I want to discuss Jonathan Taylor, who last night requested a trade from the Indianapolis Colts to go somewhere else, feeling that he's not going to get paid what he wants to be paid. Specifically, he wanted a contract extension, which Jim Irsay said that he wasn't going to discuss right now. This coming after Giants running back Saquon Barkley was in a similar situation where he wanted a multi-year deal for a certain amount of money and he wasn't able to get it. Now, through that debate, Jonathan Taylor and Jim Irsay were both vocal about it. Jonathan Taylor obviously supporting running backs, and then Jim Irsay focusing more on, hey, players, you agreed to a CBA, it's okay, man up, deal with it. Now, we can quickly group this Jonathan Taylor trade request into the same discussion we were having about Saquon Barkley and the how much running backs get paid debate and the multi-year extension problem. But I think to be a bit more realistic here, we need to think about this in two buckets. One being the ongoing running back debate, their current status in the NFL, and the other being just the Colts situation specifically. Starting with the current state of running backs, the running back position over the last decade or so, and really particularly in the last maybe 3 to 4 or 5 seasons, not very long ago, the running back position has become way more disposable than it's ever been. And I think there's two big drivers of this. More rules and offensive schemes are favoring quarterbacks more than ever before, and for the most part, teams that have signed running backs to second contracts on multi-year deals have really gotten severely burned. We're talking about Ezekiel Elliott, Le'Veon Bell, Todd Gurley. All of those guys have dealt with injuries and have really been severe disappointments compared to the amount of money that was given to them in their contracts. So because of these trends, NFL teams have been cautious to the point of not signing multi-year contracts after their rookie deal with running backs at all, no matter how big the star is. This includes Jonathan Taylor and Saquon Barkley. But not only that, the running back position as a whole has seen a significant decrease in value, and this is really reflected in where running backs are drafted now. No matter how big of a star you are coming out of college, running backs still are starting to go more so in the second round or further after, Jonathan Taylor himself being a second round pick, which means that for NFL teams, the money amount that they have to guarantee in the contract is already lower because of where the player was picked. Now, obviously, these trends, especially for somebody like Saquon Barkley, can be extremely frustrating, especially considering that you can argue Saquon Barkley carried the Giants' offense last year, and he wants to be paid, and more specifically, he wants to be paid on a multi-year contract. He wants to be guaranteed several more years in the league. Now, obviously, with the concerns that NFL teams are having with the injuries, getting burned on these contracts, running backs not being as valuable as they used to be, they're not really willing to go much further than franchise tagging the player for one season, or in some cases signing a one-year contract. The franchise tag being a pre-negotiated contract under the CBA that is sort of can be strict, maybe not favorable towards players. I'm not sure exactly how it breaks down, but each player is paid for that one season a predetermined amount as negotiated under the CBA, and that amount changes per position. So for running backs for next year, that's about $10.1 million. Now, the contract that Saquon Barkley ended up signing was a one-year deal worth about $11 million. And to break it down even further than that, from what I read, the deal is worth around $10 million guaranteed with $900,000 in incentives, including a $2 million signing bonus, which really, it's guaranteed money, but that's more so helps Giants deal with salary cap than anything else. So obviously Saquon Barkley was looking for a multi-year deal, but the one-year deal was really probably the best thing he was going to do to get the compensation that he wanted, even though it's not that much better. I would have to do a little bit more research to dive into why he might have done that versus just signing the franchise tag, which he made clear he was not going to do. Now, going back to Jonathan Taylor's situation, since he was drafted in 2020, and despite dealing with injuries last year, he still performs in the top 5 running backs in the league when looking at running back stats. And despite that, he's the 18th highest paid running back in the league according to ESPN. So being Jonathan Taylor, being in that group, of people that are high performers and yet the pay band doesn't seem to match it, I can appreciate that frustration. I can empathize with that. I can imagine how frustrating that is. I'm in a situation similar myself, I feel like. But you have to consider the organization, right? Last year, the Colts went 3-7-1 in games that Jonathan Taylor played. So clearly, he doesn't have enough of an impact on the game alone to make a significant impact. And yeah, the Colts had a rough year last year. Offensive line declined, quarterback play, roster was a bit rough. But you still have to consider that when trying to figure out the value of the player. Now, from what we know so far from this conversation that Jim Irsay and Jonathan Taylor had on Irsay's bus last night at training camp, is that Jonathan Taylor wants a contract extension, which could be multiple years, it could be 1 year. That contract is structured a little differently than just signing a new contract. But all Jim Irsay has said is that they're not open to discussing that right now. So Jonathan Taylor, entering his 4th season, either gets his 5th-year extension, signs a multi-year extension, or he plays throughout the last year of his contract and either gets franchise tagged, signs a 1-year deal, or becomes an unrestricted free agent and leaves. Now, we have to consider the fact that the Colts are no longer in the Andrew Luck era. They are no longer in the QB lease era, hopefully. They are starting over, complete rebuild, new head coach, not necessarily blowing up the roster, but you can tell that this is a significant reboot compared to the seasons prior. Now, while a star running back can take a lot of pressure off a rookie quarterback, we're not totally sure how much 4th overall pick Anthony Richardson is going to play this year. And more so than that, given Anthony Richardson's skill set and being more of a run-style quarterback, I would think the Colts are anticipating Richardson eating into running back stats. Rushing touchdowns, rushes, yards per rush, rushing yards per game, stuff like that. So I'm not sure where the Colts see Jonathan Taylor's value going forward despite being this amazing player. So, considering that the Colts aren't going to be competing for a Super Bowl this year, and the fact that they're going through a significant rebuild, I kind of thought that Colts GM Chris Ballard would have traded Jonathan Taylor at the end of last season and gotten a lot more draft picks, especially late round picks, that he could have used to build the roster in the draft, which Chris Ballard can't get enough of. Now, whether or not this was actually on the table last year, I have no idea, because since the end of last season, Jonathan Taylor has been on the unable to perform list, which I imagine makes him untradeable. So at that point, Jonathan Taylor is either valuable enough to trade for draft picks, which he wasn't, or he's valuable enough to keep on the roster, see how he does, see if he gets another injury, and then maybe sign him to a franchise tag or a 1-year deal like Saquon Barkley did, or let him go. And I think Jonathan Taylor's figured that out. I think he can see that coming, and so if the Colts aren't willing to sign that multi-year deal that he wants to go to a franchise that will do that. Now, obviously the Colts have to honor that trade, and I'm not sure that they will. What I will say is that there is a potential scenario I could see happening where, similar to last year, you have 1 or 2 teams, just surprises everybody out of the gate. Super Bowl contender, has a really good early start to the season, but is still missing 1 or 2 key pieces to sort of get them over the edge. This is what happened last year with the 49ers and Christian McCaffrey. So I could see, if we, like I said, have this surprise team come out of nowhere, I could see them potentially making a move to say, hey, what do we have to do to get Jonathan Taylor on our roster because we're trying to make the Super Bowl this year? That could happen late in the season, or mid-season, or some cases 4 or 5 games in. But I don't see that happening. And what I see even more unlikely is that Jonathan Taylor actually getting a trade and then signing a multi-year contract as a result. Unless he goes to a very poorly run franchise, I really doubt that that's going to happen. So the most likely scenario is that the trade doesn't happen, and we go throughout the season, his contract ends, and really he's just in the same boat that Saquon Barkley was this year, which is unfortunate. I think given how talented Jonathan Taylor is, it probably feels really unfair. But as I said in the opener, depending on what you choose to do with your career, a lot of your career trajectory, your earnings potential, and your success is predetermined. It's not something you really have that much control over. And that's just the way it is. Like I said, whether you're an accountant or whether you're an NFL player, that's just the way it is. Now, whether this trend continues, I have no idea. Whether running backs continue to go on this negative trajectory of value, who's to say? It's more than likely, but I have no idea. So if I was a running back in the NFL now, I would just say that we're entering an era where the earnings potential for running backs is starting to go down. And yeah, I would try to find a franchise to sign me to a multi-year contract as well. But I think those days might be over. maybe a very poorly run team, like I said, will sign a 2 to 3 year extension max. But I mean, you really have to show that you're worth something and show that you're not injury prone, which means having no games missed with injuries. So, with that said, I hope this was an interesting elaboration on this topic. Thank you for watching.